I have a new magazine. Thought I'd read a couple stories before bed. If you would like to listen, let's go back in time for a little bit and have good dreams. Okay? Sound like a plan? Get this opened. Oh, look how cute. Look at the snowman. He has a village inside of him. Isn't that cute? Okay. Oh, excuse me. This is good old days, September and October of this year. Can you hear me okay? Wait, you know what? Let me shut the fan off. And you'll hear the crickets. Dave just went to bed. And I said, I'm going to read a couple stories and then I'll be in there. Excuse me. Hey, Whisper, there you are. I was wondering if anybody was going to say hi. Okay. Let's see here. Here we go. Let me find a story. There's so many. Let's see. How about a Norwegian birthday tradition? Lutefisk. Thankfully, this was a once-a-year Norwegian birthday tradition by Doug Sletton. Picture of the family that we're going to read about. One of the things I remember most about my dad is that he was a Norwegian through and through. There was a lot of Scandinavian blood where I grew up in central North Dakota in the 1950s. My dad was the first generation of his family born in the United States. Both his mother and father were first generation immigrants from Norway, and he grew up eating all of the foods of his Norwegian heritage. Jeanette, I hope you're here. I bet you'll like this story. Among the foods he grew up with was lutefisk. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right. Lutefisk. Anyone who doesn't know about it will think I am making this up. Lutefisk is dried codfish or ling that has been soaked in a lye solution for several days to rehydrate it. It is then rinsed with cold water to remove the lye, and then it is boiled. You might think of it as having the consistency of fish jello. The only redeeming value is that it is served with loads of melted butter. Ugh. Dad married a full-blooded German whose parents were first-generation immigrants too. My mother served the good old German dishes that she learned from her mother. I was weaned on sauerkraut, Knopla, German sausage, dumplings, and Kuchen, Kuchen. But Dad loved his special Norwegian delicacy. Once a year on his birthday, Mom would relent and give Dad his beloved lutefisk dinner. I imagine it was a birthday gift to Dad that Mom would allow her kitchen to smell like boiled overshoes for one day a year. Ugh. Ugh. But Dad loved his special. Oh, wait, I already read that one. Out of respect and love for my father and our Norwegian heritage, I couldn't articulate my loathing for this gelatinous abomination that Dad classified as food. But you see, my brother and I were expected to carry on the Norwegian Viking lutefisk dinner tradition, just as we carried his name. Dad would proudly serve up mountains of this wobbly fish, preserved with lye, and smile proudly as he put the huge steaming dish in front of my brother Curly and me. Here's the Dad. I don't think I showed you well enough. Let's see. The Dad right there with breakfast will be later this morning. There he is right there, the dark-haired guy in the back. Let's see. I harbored a deep resentment bordering on pure hatred for Mom and my sister, who were allowed to eat chicken at the same table. They were excused from the lutefisk brotherhood. Curly and I gave Oscar-worthy performances by eating this nuclear meltdown. We both politely acted our way through the meal, always trying to save hurt feelings by appearing as eager to dig into the lutefisk as Dad was. We never tipped off our real feelings as we tried to get into the spirit of the day. After all, we didn't want to rain on Dad's parade. It's a great batch, Dad would say, as he proudly set it on the table. It sure looks good, Dad, Curly would say. Liar. Yeah, looks great, I would dutifully add. For fertilizing gardens, I thought to myself. Ah, that smell reminds me of home when I was a kid, boys. Oh, they have a picture of it here, too. It's a real distinctive smell, Dad, Curly said. It's distinctive, all right. The only thing close is probably singed hair. There's plenty, boys, so don't be bashful. Yeah, Dad, and the rest of the family has to eat chicken, eh? Poor souls. The first one that says it is good chicken gets kicked under the table. The whole meal was spent singing the praises of this gelatinous cod. and I somehow found a way to push it down my throat. As soon as the first bite hit bottom, I felt ill, but I carried on. As I bravely smiled through the meal and watched my dad and brother, my heart sank when they both had another helping and the serving tray headed my way. The rest of the meal is only faded memory. Your mind does that sometimes to block out painful remembrances. As the meal closed out, my dad proudly cleaned off the empty lutefisk platter. He and his junior Vikings had polished off nearly all the lutefisk. Curly sat next to me with a drool of melted butter on his chin and patted his stomach to show Dad his satisfaction. Then, just as Dad went into the kitchen and out of sight with the empty lutefisk platter, Curly turned to me with a face about the color of dying grass and said, "Aren't you glad it's over for another year?" Okay, here it is. Here's what it looks like. Let me take this off the holder. I can just... Yeah, this room's a mess, guys, so don't look too closely. We got a bunch of stuff sitting around. We're just reading some few good old days stories, Tracy. We just read about this lutefisk. There it is. You can rewind and find out about this. At least you're here. We just got us a little group tonight. Nobody wants to hang out. And you know what? That's okay. If they want to miss out, I say let them. We don't want them anyway, right? Right. Let's see. Okay, this one's called The Shoe War. Drastic Measures Would Win This Battle, or Would They? By April Knight. Here's a picture of her. She's all smiles in her Acme cowboy boots in 1949. Yes, we just got us a little slumber party going on. Here we go. There she is. Okay. Oh, look at this, Tracy. You missed it. Look at this advertisement. Look how pretty that is. Wait. Look how pretty. A snowman with a village inside of him. You need that outfit. Isn't that pretty, though? I really like that. Okay. Let's see. Maybe I can sit you guys up a little more. I don't think it's going to stay on this cup. Well, you know what? I'll go like this. It'll sit it. No, it won't. Never mind. We'll just put you right here. In 1949, I was starting the first grade. In Kansas, most of the kids went barefoot all summer, and we had one pair of shoes for school. Some kids had Sunday shoes they wore to church and birthday parties, but my family was poor, so I only had one pair of shoes for school, plus some worn out shoes that were cast off from an older cousin. I had you know what? This is bugging me that you guys are just looking at that. I know I can fix this holder. Hold on. You probably aren't looking at anything anyway, but just to make it a little bit cozier. I know that's kind of dumb, but that's all we have. We're a very generic setup here. Okay. It is better, okay. Can look at the creepy little doll. I had my heart set on a beautiful pair of patent leather Mary Jane shoes with a thin strap. Didn't Carolyn say she really likes Mary Jane shoes? I wanted anklets with lace on them too. I imagined I might even learn to tap dance while I walked to school every day, and then I would amaze the other kids at recess. Getting new shoes was a big occasion. Mother and I would walk uptown to Scott's shoe store and sometimes have a cherry Coke at the Rexall drugstore on the way home. The shoe salesman was dressed in a suit and tie. He greeted us, and after seating us in a row of chairs, he used a large metal contraption to measure my feet. "Are we getting school shoes today?" he asked. "Yes," I answered. "I want patent leather Mary Jane shoes." "That's nonsense," Mother said. "Those aren't school shoes. Show us some good, sturdy Buster Brown shoes. Brown with laces." My heart hit the floor. Buster Brown shoes were for boys or girls. In my opinion, they were big, clunky, heavy boys' shoes. They were made for running and kicking balls. They weren't made for tap dancing on the way to school. The salesman brought out several pairs, and they all looked the same to me. Inside every shoe was printed a picture of a winking boy wearing a silly hat and his dog that had sharp, pointed teeth like a shark's. I didn't want shoes that I had a boy and a dog and his dog inside. I didn't want brown shoes with laces. I wanted pretty shoes with buckles. The salesman put the shoes on my feet and asked me how they felt. I said they hurt my feet. The salesman led my mother and me to a 4-foot-tall wooden cabinet that had a sign that said it was a shoe-fitting fluoroscope. The salesman said it was an x-ray machine and it would show if the shoes fit properly or not. I shoved my feet into the hole, and the three of us looked into the 3 portholes. We saw the bones of my feet outlined in the image of the stitching on the shoes' soles. I was terrified and fascinated at the same time. I was looking at my own skeleton feet. "They fit perfectly," the salesman said. My mother agreed. "That will be $1.95, the salesman said. Did any of you guys ever have those shoes? Hey, Mary, there you are. I've been looking for you. You haven't been here the last couple nights. We're reading old days stories tonight. Just a couple before bed. Let me do my inhaler real quick. I always wanted those Buster Brown shoes only because I saw them advertised on TV, and I don't think we ever had them. We always got those saddle shoes. One more puff. Yeah, but you had to wear shoes to school, Tracy. I wanted cowboy boots too, so freaking bad. No wonder we get along, Whisper. And I wanted those freaking go-go boots too. I did finally get a pair once they were out of style. Must have went on sale somewhere. Okay, let's see. That's a lot of money for a pair of kids' shoes. My mother started digging through her little black change purse with the snap closing. But they'll last the full school year, the salesman said, as he wrapped the shoes in brown paper and tied them with a string. I declared war on my shoes. I vowed I would drag my feet every step of the way to school, and I would kick every rock I saw. Hey, where's the crickets tonight? I just realized that. Is it because, hey, Sassy Darcy, beep beep? Is it because I have the light on in here? I can hear them outside. I would wear them out as quickly as possible. Perhaps then I could get the patent leather Mary Jane shoes that I really wanted. On the first day of school, my archenemy Nancy was wearing Mary Jane shoes like I wanted. Nancy's family owned the grocery store. They were rich and could afford any shoes Nancy wanted. Nancy took one look at my shoes and said, "Those are boys' shoes. They are Buster Brown shoes." I couldn't argue. There was nothing to distinguish the girls' shoes from the boys' shoes. 7 boys and 4 girls in our class had shoes just like mine. I waded through every mud puddle, shuffled across gravel, and even used rocks to scratch my shoes. The shoes were beginning to look worn, but they didn't wear out, although I did manage to break a pair of shoelaces almost every week. I refused to listen to Smilin' Ed's Buster Brown gang on the radio. I was personally at war with Buster Brown and didn't want to hear him say, "Hi, I'm Buster Brown. I live in a shoe. That's my dog Tig. Look for him in there too." I hated the idea of him living in my shoe. I was surprised it didn't bother other people that a boy and a dog lived in a shoe. Winter came and my war against my Buster Browns continued. Ice and snow covered the ground, and much to my delight, Nancy's black patent leather shoes cracked from side to side where her foot bent when she walked. Oh my gosh, guys. I did have those black patent leather Mary Janes because I've always remembered that happening with some black shoes that I had like that. Wow, they were Mary Janes. Okay, I did have a pair. I thought they weren't Mary Janes because they did that. Okay, I guess I did have a kind of fancy shoe when I was a kid. Let's see. I always thought my feet, I just walked weird in them or something. Wow, that's surprising. Of course, Nancy's parents bought her another pair of shoes right in the middle of the school year, which for most of us was unheard of. She now had brown and white saddle Oxfords. Wow, I had those too. And I wasn't a rich kid, but I'm feeling like one right now. I had the black and white ones, I think. I didn't care what kind of shoes Nancy had anymore because I had a new love. I'd seen a pair of Acme cowboy boots in the window of Scott's shoe store, and now I wanted cowboy boots. They had pointed toes, heels almost an inch high, and the colorful designs on the high tops. That's what we wanted, Whisper. If I had Acme cowboy boots, I could ride with Roy Rogers and Hopalong Cassidy. They couldn't say no once they saw my boots. But it was only the end of November. I wouldn't get a new pair of shoes for another 10 months. unless something terrible happened to my shoes. Strangely enough, while I was walking home from school, two men wearing black capes and black masks pushed me down and stole my shoes and drove away in a black car. I walked home in the snow in my stocking feet. My mother didn't believe I'd been robbed by a gang of shoe thieves, and she demanded to know where my shoes were. I confessed I'd thrown them down the gutter drain near the school. I was banished to my room until my parents could figure out what to do with their ungrateful, spoiled daughter. He thought the dog was scary looking. I wonder if I'd had to walk to school. I wondered if I'd have to walk to school in my socks the rest of the year. My mother called my Aunt Marge, who brought over a sack of my cousin's old shoes. They were all too big or too small. I bawled the entire time I tried on shoes. All of them were even worse than the Buster Brown shoes. I want a pair of Acme cowboy boots, I bawled. Girls don't wear cowboy boots, my mother said. Dale Evans does, I sniffed. When I was your age, Aunt Marge said, my mother made a dress for me that was white and had red polka dots all over it. The kids at school called it my measles dress and ran away from me whenever I wore it. I hated that dress. Did you have to wear it forever? I asked. No, I crawled through a fence and I got it torn. Aunt Marge smiled. I had to crawl through the fence 4 times before it was damaged beyond repair. My mother laughed. I was not going to be thrown into a dungeon after all. Buster Brown shoes are the best school shoes, Mother said. Tomorrow morning we will go buy another pair, and this pair had better last until summer. Christmas is only a few weeks away, said Aunt Marge. What if I come with you when you buy the school shoes? And I'll buy the... Gotta turn the page. And I'll buy the... Acme cowboy boots. They can be April's Christmas gift a little early. She can wear them after school and on weekends and into the summer. I thought I could hear angels singing. I still had to wear those boys' brown shoes to school, but the minute I got home every day, I would pull on my Acme boots and stomp around the house like a cowboy. I don't remember any shoes I wore to school after that. It didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was that for the next year, I was the only girl in the first grade who had cowboy boots. Nancy was jealous. Ha ha ha. She got good old Nancy, didn't she? Here's another picture of little April. Here she shows her new Buster Brown school shoes for first grade in 1949. And she looks kind of cute there. Let's see, I don't think you guys can see too well. She looks like a little munchkin. Let's see what else. Here's a story called Flower Pot Justice. She became judge, jury, and executioner, and he was the better for it, by D.E. Brigham. Here's a picture of the pot, the flower, the plant, the plant, the plant. It is 1958. I am 10 years old in fourth grade at West Winfield Central School in upstate New York. My teacher, Miss Goldsmith, is standing at the front of the classroom with her hand on the shoulder of a new student. Little do I know, but this student is about to change the course of my life. Class, says Miss Goldsmith, we have a new student joining us today. Her name is Sarah. She just moved here from Arkansas. Please welcome her and make her feel at home. Oh, I remember when they would introduce kids. I'd feel so excited, so curious. I always wanted to be one of those kids, but we never moved. I never got to be one. Any of you guys ever get to be the new kid getting introduced in class? A smattering of "Hi, Sarah," and "Welcome" came from 5 rows of students. Sarah appears shyly from behind her long brown bangs. "Ha," she says. Steel shoes, they're not Michael Jordan's. Nope, never got to be me. See, us either. Maybe that's why us 3 are here, because we never got to be the new student. Let's see. Miss Goldsmith lifts her hand from Sarah's shoulder and smiles warmly. Sarah heads toward her assigned desk at the end of the row. Unfortunately, she has to walk past Floyd's desk. "Ha! Arkansas," says Floyd. He smirks. Sarah glares back at Floyd. She presses her lips together and hurries by. "None of that, Floyd," said Miss Goldsmith. "Her name is Sarah. Don't be rude." But it's too late. Floyd has struck a nerve and he knows it. He shields his mouth from Miss Goldsmith with his hand and turns towards me and a few others he calls Floyd's boys. He whispers rhythmically, "Arkansas, Arkansas." He jabs his finger in Sarah's direction. We have our marching orders. Throughout the day, whenever one of us boys is near Sarah, we chant, "Arkansas, Arkansas." Sarah pretends not to hear us, but her flashing brown eyes betray her. At this stage in our lives, we lack the emotional maturity to consider the impact of our behavior on Sarah's feelings. What matters to us is winning approval from the boys. However, my inability to empathize with others is about to change dramatically. At dismissal time, Miss Goldsmith reminds us to take home our bean plants that we have been growing as a science project. The plants form a long green row along the window ledge beneath the shades. "Handle them carefully," she said. "Plants don't like to be moved." I'm proud of my healthy, strong plant blossoming from that clay flower pot. I can't wait to show my mother. I pick up my flower pot gingerly and cradle it in my hands. I step out into the hall amid the commotion of milling students. I am careful not to let anyone bump my plant. By chance, I find myself walking behind Sarah. Her long brown hair nearly touches her waist. Floyd appears and begins to chant, "Arkansas, Arkansas." He gestures for me to join in. I do so, even though I continue to worry about protecting my plant. We follow Sarah, chanting down the hallway, through the school entrance, down the stone steps, to the line of buses waiting for us. For good measure, I pinch a few red berries off the sidewalk hedge and throw them one by one at Sarah. They bounce off her back. "Bullseye," shouts Floyd. He flashes an OK sign and heads off to his bus. Sarah continues toward her bus, ignoring the berries and my chance. When she comes abreast of the open door of bus 7, she climbs the first climbs the first step. I follow close behind and give an extra loud Arkansas as a parting shot, but I am not prepared for what happens next. Sarah slams her books down on the top step, wheels around, and glares down at me with fist clenched. I freeze. She reaches down and snatches my flower pot from my hands. She raises it as high as her arms can reach and brings it down squarely and definitively on my head. The pot shatters and dirt spills all over my head, down my back, and onto the sidewalk. I reel backward from impact and stagger to regain my balance. My eyes water. Sarah points her finger at me. You stop bothering me. Oh, I like Sarah. She boards the bus, leaving me on the sidewalk, stunned. Students hurrying by tramp on my beautiful bean plant. I drop to my knees and rescue the damaged remains. That night, as I reflect on the incident, I realize none of this would have happened if I hadn't listened to Floyd. I think about how hard it must be to move to a new state and school and be teased for no reason at all. The next morning, I feel shame as my eyes meet Sarah's in the classroom. Although I cannot bring myself to formally apologize, I do the next best thing. I said, "Hi, Sarah." She looks back, startled, as if uncertain on how to respond. "Ha," she says. She smiles. "How's that head?" "Smarter," I say. We both laugh. From that day on, I disassociate myself from Floyd and his boys. I no longer seek nor need their approval. Thanks to Flower Pot Justice, I have a new outlook on life and a new friend. Now that's cute, isn't it? One tough little girl. Here's one called Coming of Age by Crossing the Bar. This rite of passage was never forgotten nor repeated, by Marilyn Ludwig. And here's a picture of Marilyn on the right playing dress up with her friend Peggy in 1949. They look cute. Can't really see them too well, but a Headley adventure and certain danger. I was thrilled but nervous. Okay, let me be honest. I was scared to death, but there was no turning back. I was 7 years old. I would no longer be considered a little kid. I must go on. Death, I decided, would be better than being called a sissy baby. There were 2 pipes going over the gully on the western side of Anvil Points, Colorado. The Federal Bureau of Mines camp, where I lived in the late 1940s and early 50s. I don't know what was in those pipes, water or maybe natural gas. The one at the lower, narrow end of the gully was fat and kind of flat on top. That pipe I could cross with ease. Sometimes I even ran across it. I figured that if I fell, I'd just break my leg or arm. Then I'd have a cast. That would be fun. Everyone would sign my cast or draw pictures on it. I would be very popular at school. But only brave kids crossed the other pipe. It was skinny, and there was no place to change your mind and turn around when you were halfway across. The pipe was high above treacherous, sharp rocks. If I fell and cracked my head wide open again, the way I did when I fell off the jungle gym on the playground, Dr. Moore would not be able to put me back together again. I would be dead for sure. The other kids had gathered at the pipe to watch. The mean boys were egging me on. "Come on, scaredy cat," they taunted. Peggy Shaw, one of the big girls, shook her head. "Don't do it, Marilyn," she said. "Just go home." No, this was my hour of reckoning, of whether or not I was brave or foolish. Firmly, I stepped onto the pipe. Pretend it's a bar, I thought, just like the low bar at school. That's even skinnier. You balance on that all the time. You'll never be a circus star when you grow up if you can't do this now. Just one step at a time. No more thoughts, not even a pause in the middle. One more step, now another. Keep on going. Look ahead, not down, not back. I was hardly aware that I had reached the other side until I heard the cheers. I made it. "Now come back," someone screamed, either friend or foe. But that was a different matter. I was absolutely certain going back would be scarier. After all, I was only 7. All those big kids on the other side were 9 or 10. I bet they hadn't done it when they were 7. I didn't even look their way. Instead, I walked all the way down the path that led to my fat friend, the easy pipe to cross. Then I'd be close to home where my dolls were waiting. That was a short one. Let's see, what else? These show a lot of pictures, so I won't do this right now. Let's see. Grandma's Secret Recipe. Let's read this one. Here is a picture of April and her grandma in Kansas in 1947. The grandmas always looked so old back then, didn't they? Excuse me. I became her accomplice as we canned her specialty every year. Yeah, crickets are back. Spending the weekend with my grandparents in 1950 was not a treat. They didn't even own a television, and their farm was in the middle of nowhere in Kansas. All you could see for miles was corn or wheat. Grandpa hardly ever spoke at all, and although Grandma chattered a lot, she spoke about her garden and sewing and making a new dress or apron. Their dog didn't fetch, and their cats were barn cats, and they didn't want to be petted. I was stuck with them for the weekend because my parents were helping my aunt and uncle move to another town, and I would only be in the way. I was 8 years old, and I was sure I was going to die from boredom. I brought some Little Lulu comic books with me, but I'd already read them twice. I was sitting in Grandma's rocking chair, rocking it as fast as I could, when Grandma came into the room and asked me if I could keep a secret. I stopped rocking. "I have a secret," Grandma said. "If I trust you with my secret, you can't tell anyone. Not ever." "I cross my heart and hope to die," I said, not really knowing what that even meant. She motioned for me to follow her to a shed near the house. She opened some cardboard boxes that held dozens of cans of beets. Ugh. "First of all, we take off all the labels and burn them in the burn barrel," she said. Suddenly, things were getting interesting. Grandma had a secret, and we were removing labels from cans of beets and burning the labels. Anything that involved fire was exciting to an 8-year-old. After we burned the labels, we all carried we carried all the cans inside the house and stacked them in the kitchen. Now I'll open the cans, she said, and you rinse them out and put them on the floor and jump on them to flatten them out. She opened the cans and drained the juice into big kettles and put the beets into more big kettles. You're a very big girl to help Grandma, she said with a smile. She went into the pantry, this is funny, and got dozens of mason jars and lids and then placed them on the kitchen table. She boiled the beet juice and added sugar and vinegar. Then she began filling the mason jars with beets and the modified juice. You take these cinnamon sticks and break them in half, then put half a stick in each jar, she said. An hour later, there were 50 jars of pickled beets sitting on the table and kitchen counter. They all had labels on them. Grandma's pickled beets. We hauled the smashed cans out to the dump ditch and threw them onto a pile of rusty cans. We sat down at the kitchen table and Grandma gave me red Kool-Aid and oatmeal cookies. Thank you for your help. Now that is done for another year, she sighed. You see, people have always thought I was a good cook. And I'm famous for my pickled beets, for pickles, relish, jellies, jams, and apple butter. I nodded. The truth is, I haven't canned any of those things for 20 years. When I was young, I enjoyed making all those things, but as I got older, it got harder and harder. Then I decided just once I would cheat and buy everything, put it into jars, and pretend I had made them myself. Well, no one noticed the difference. Not one person could tell my homemade canned goods from store-bought. So every year, I'd just buy all this food from the store and then put it in mason jars and put them on shelves in the pantry with my name and date on the label, and no one ever knew. She laughed. I didn't think I'd ever heard her laugh before, and I laughed too. You can never tell anyone, she said. I shook my head and put my finger to my lips. Can I help you again next year? I asked. And she smiled and nodded. For the next 3 years, I helped Grandma fake her homemade canned goods. And all Del Monte. We canned beets and peaches, green beans, and all kinds of jams and jellies, and her famous apple butter. We kept her pantry filled with mason jars. Whenever she had company, she'd always send a couple of jars home with her visitors, and they would always be so pleased. They would carry the jars to their cars like they were something rare and valuable. Grandma and I had great fun together. I spent a lot of weekends with her, especially during canning time. I wonder if she had other secrets, but if she did, she didn't share them with me. But I can still remember my parents eating pickled beets and saying how nobody could make them like Grandma did. And they were right. No one else made them like she did. That is cute. But wouldn't they go bad? Wouldn't she have to, actually boil them like how they do, to set the seal? Maybe she did, right? I would think, because it sounds like she'd be killing a lot of people if she didn't. Here's another cooking one. A bride's first cooking lesson. Watching closely, and Betty Crocker helped prepare the cook and the meal by Carol Montgomery. Here's some green beans. That is funny, isn't it, Mary? And there's some cornbread in a skillet. This fancy way I'm showing pictures. The rap on our trailer house door startled me. My new husband, Bob, had just left for work, and I was washing the breakfast dishes. Peering out the window, I saw my mother-in-law. Quickly, I opened the door and stepped up into our minuscule living room. We visited briefly, and then she said, "Cot and I wanted to invite you two over for supper Friday night, if you don't already have plans." That's a name, Cot, C-O-T. Over was the 25 feet or so to their back door, since we had proudly parked our 27-foot home in their backyard in Lubbock, Texas, in early June 1957 when we got married. "I'll check with Bob tonight and let you know." I hesitated for a moment. "Can I help you in the kitchen?" "Sure you can," she said with a smile. "We're going to have chicken fried venison, and since the garden's beginning to come in, we'll have fresh vegetables. Why don't you come over about 4:30, since Bob gets off at 5:30? Later that evening, I called them and said, "I'll be there at 4:30. Bob was practically smacking his lips when I told him you were fixing venison. When Bob and I got engaged in 1955, I promised my parents we wouldn't get married until I graduated from high school. I took extra courses, attended summer school, and finished in 3 years." Yep, there's that old cricket. Bob was very sweet about my efforts, but I had so much to learn. We had invited my parents over one night after we'd been married just 3 weeks. I quickly found out how hard it is to coordinate a meal so that everything comes out hot or cold at the same time. Face flushed from the kitchen heat and embarrassment over my clumsy efforts, I finally got everything on the table. All three complimented me on the meal, but after that, I was even more determined to learn how to be a good cook. At 4:30 on Friday afternoon, I walked up to Mother and Dad Montgomery's back door. "What do you want me to do first?" I called as I entered the kitchen. Mother Montgomery gave me a bowl full of green beans. "Do you know how to snap green beans?" "That is one thing my mother taught me how to do," I said. "We snap off each end, then snap the bean in two. Is that what you do?" "Yes, and here's the pot to cook them in." She handed me a large paper sack. "Put the ends in here and also the corn husk." While I was preparing the beans and corn, Mother Montgomery retrieved a large bowl with venison backstrap that had soaked an hour or so in buttermilk. She dipped each piece of venison in seasoned flour, then in fresh buttermilk, and then in flour again. As I watched, she heated a lot of shortening in a large iron skillet. "The secret of frying is to get the oil hot, at just the right temperature," she instructed as she put the pieces of venison in the deep iron pot one by one. While the venison was frying, she checked the marinated sliced cucumbers and onions in the refrigerator. Ooh, I love that stuff. Cucumbers in the vinegar. An onion. "I'm finished with the beans," I said. It is, isn't it? Right? They do. They take over. Last night there was one in our bedroom. It sounded so freaking loud in there. "I'm finished with the beans," I said. "How much water should I put in the pan?" "Just barely cover them and add some salt and a little bacon grease." I did as she instructed and then got to work shucking the corn. "See how small the kernels are?" she said. "Take your fingernail and break one of the kernels. If it pops, It's just the right size for eating. If it's hard to pop, then the natural sugar has already turned to starch. I tried it, and sure enough, they were at that just right stage. Mother Montgomery took the last of the venison out of the pan and added that batch to the other pieces that were draining on paper towels. While I'd been snapping and shucking, she had put together the cornbread mixture, poured it into a hot iron skillet, and put it into the oven. It was almost done, so she opened the oven, took a spatula, and turned the cornbread over. Surprised, I asked, "Why do you turn the cornbread over?" "We like it crisp on both sides," she said. Now I could watch her make the milk gravy. Nothing gives gravy great flavor like cooking it in the same pan the meat has been fried in. Her gravy was a beautiful light brown, thickened just enough. Everything was ready, and at the same time. I've always heard venison tastes gamey, but this doesn't. "It's delicious," I said, after I took my first bite. Bob said it's partially proper field dressing and knowing how to cook it. Soaking it in buttermilk helps remove the rest of the wild taste. After we finished eating and had a good visit, I looked at Mother Montgomery in admiration. I had decided that in addition to poring over the Betty Crocker cookbook I'd received at my wedding shower, I would observe her cooking every chance I got, and I could hardly wait for the catfish and hush puppy supper. Ooh, I bet that was good. And somebody just said hi. Where'd you go? Who is that? Hi, Mike. Let's see. Let's find another one here before bed. It's the great. You thought it was your ceiling fan. Okay, this one's called Mischief on Maple Avenue. They found ways to amuse themselves pranking drivers, by Peggy Fitzgerald McNamara. And here's Johnny, pictured here, was the youngest in his family with 5 older sisters. Poor Johnny. 5 older sisters, and not a brother. And the house on Maple Avenue with the 2 bushes in front was a perfect setting for the mischief that took place there. Wow, this is a nice house. It's like a real nice home. My brother was the 3rd one, and he has 5 sisters. Only boy. When you grow up in a family of 6 siblings and you are the only male and the baby family, you tend to find mischief with your friends rather than your 5 sisters. Such was the case one summer day in the early 1970s in our Chicago suburb of Downers Grove. My brother, Johnny, and his friend Frankie were bored, so they decided to play some pranks on unsuspecting drivers passing through our neighborhood. Our street, Maple Avenue, was well traveled, which made it the perfect setting for 2 mischievous 7-year-olds to have some fun. First, the boys made a pile of mud balls from the rain-soaked ground at the side of our house. They spent the next several minutes flinging the mud balls at passing cars and then hiding behind the house. This continued until one driver chased them down the block and threatened to call the police. Johnny and Frankie moved on to a prank that was common at the time, tossing aluminum trash can lids onto the ground and yelling, "Hey, you lost a hubcap," to drivers zipping along Maple Avenue. This again ended with an angry adult chasing the two pranksters, who hopped a fence and hid in our neighbor's yard until it was safe to come out. Emboldened and yet determined not to be yelled at again, Johnny came up with the best brainstorm of the day. He snuck into our mother's closet and borrowed her gray wig, a common fashion statement for women of this time, and then attached to it a piece of fishing line. Waiting until there were no cars passing by, he placed the wig on the ground near the curb across the street and pulled the fishing line through a hedge of bushes near our house. Safely hidden behind the bushes, Johnny and Frankie took turns gently pulling the wig the wig across the road with the fishing line as cars drove past. The first few cars stopped. Their occupants looked at the wig curiously, then drove on. A few people hung their heads out the window to get a closer look and try to figure out what kind of gray animal with no face or legs was scooting across the road. The boys also tried pulling the wig at varying speeds, which seemed to confuse the drivers even more. That's cute. By this time, some of my sisters and I were gathered at the picture window in our music room, watching to see how many people the boys fooled. The fun ended when Mom came in to see what all the fuss was about and saw her dressing up to go out wig being dragged across the road. That was the end of the line for the two pranksters. Although Mom had to work hard to keep a straight face as she told the boys that in the future her wigs were off limits. It was innocent fun for two friends looking for excitement back in the good old days. That was cute. I've never heard of those pranks. Well, that's it, guys. I think I'm going to call it a night, and thank you for coming and listening. I hope you enjoyed the stories. Our own little reading nook here. Isn't that cute, Mike? Oh, you've caught up on sleep. Good, Mike. Good for you. Okay, guys. Thanks a lot for coming. Really appreciate it. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.